Night settled strangely over Georgetown. The industrial hum that usually fills this part of the city, the trucks, the low thrum of machinery, the distant clatter of metal on metal, seems to fade the moment you step onto this block. It's as if the neighborhood itself is holding its breath, waiting for something you can't quite name. Streetlights here flicker in a way that feels less like a malfunction and more like indecision. The shadows they cast stretch too far across the pavement, reaching toward the building at the end of the block, the Georgetown Morgue. From a distance, it looks unremarkable, a squat, utilitarian structure tucked between warehouses and workshops, the kind of place you'd pass without a second glance during the day. But at night, the building seems to shift, not physically, but in presence, in weight, in attention. You slow your steps without meaning to. Something about the air feels different here, heavier, cooler, as if the temperature drops a few degrees the closer you get. You tell yourself it's just the wind funneling between the buildings, but the air is still, too still. You stop across the street and take in the facade. The windows are dark, but not empty. There's a quality to the darkness inside, a density, that makes it feel like the building is watching you from behind the glass. Not with malice, not with welcome, just awareness. A truck rumbles past behind you, but the sound feels distant, muffled, like you've stepped into a pocket of quiet carved out from the rest of the city. You take a breath, and the air tastes faintly metallic, cold, cold. Across the street slowly, each step feeling louder than it should. The pavement seems to echo under your feet. The closer you get, the more the building seems to settle on into itself, as if bracing for your arrival. You reach the door. Don't go in. The metal handle is colder than the air around it. Not winter cold, but the kind of cold that feels deliberate, like something on the other side has been waiting. You hesitate, and in that moment the silence deepens. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of listening. You push the door open, and the building exhales. Georgetown has always been a place shaped by work, hard, physical, and glamorous work. The kind of work that leaves calluses on hands and grit in the air. The rail lines cut through the neighborhood like scars, carrying freight in and out of the city long before Seattle became the place it is now. The factories and the warehouses rise in the blocky silhouettes, their walls stained with decades of weather and industry. Even now, the air carries the faint smell of oil, metal, and dust. It's a scent that settles into the brickwork, into the asphalt, as if into the bones of the neighborhood. Georgetown isn't polished, it isn't curated, it's lived in, worn down, and stubbornly itself. The morgue fit into this landscape long before it became a curiosity. It wasn't built to be noticed, it wasn't built to be admired. It was built to serve a need, a quiet, unspoken need that every industrial district eventually faces. Workers died here, not in dramatic, headline-grabbing ways, but in the small, tragic accidents that never make the news. A fall, a crush injury, a machine that didn't stop in time. The morgue was where those stories ended. Over the decades, the building shifted roles: mortuary, crematorium, funeral home, each identity leaving its own imprint. Some records survive, others don't. Entire decades are marked by gaps, inconsistencies, or silence. And that silence is what people notice most. Not tragedy, not scandal, just absence. The kind of absence that feels intentional. The kind that makes you wonder what was never written down. The door closes behind you with a soft but decisive click. The kind of sound that feels louder in memory than it does in the moment. The air inside is noticeably colder, but not in the way an old building usually is. This cold feels directed, like it's coming from a specific point deeper inside the structure. Your footsteps land on tile that's been worn smooth by decades of use. The sound echoes down the hallway, bouncing off the walls in a way that makes the space feel longer, narrower, and more enclosed than it looked from the outside. Lighting is dim, a mix of aging fluorescents and emergency bulbs that cast a pale, uneven glow across the floor. You pause, letting your eyes adjust. The silence settles around you like dust. There's a faint smell here, not strong enough to identify, but impossible to ignore. Metallic, dry, old. The kind of smell that clings to places where machinery once ran hot for hours at a time. You take a few steps forward, and the air shifts again. Not a breeze, not a draft, just a subtle change in pressure, like someone has stepped into the hallway behind you. You turn, nothing. Just the door, just the quiet, but the feeling lingers. The hallway stretches ahead of you, long and narrow, lined with tile that reflects the dim light in a way that makes the floor look wet even though it's dry. The walls are painted in a color that might once have been white, but now sits somewhere between gray and beige, the shade of a place that's been cleaned often, but never truly refreshed. You walk slowly, listening to the way your footsteps echo. The sound doesn't behave the way it should. It doesn't fade naturally. It seems to hang in the air for a moment too long, like the building is holding on to it. Halfway down the hall, you pass a door with a small fogged window. The glass is opaque, but you can see the faint outline of shelves inside. Storage, maybe. Supplies, tools. The kind of room that would have been used constantly when the building was in operation. You lean closer to the glass. For a moment, you think you see movement, a shift of shadow, a flicker of something passing between the shelves. Blink, it's gone. You tell yourself it was nothing. But the building feels like it disagrees. The door to the preparation room is slightly ajar, as if someone stepped out and never came back. You push it open gently, and the hinges let out a soft groan. Not loud, but enough to make the hair on your arms rise. The room is larger than you expected. Stainless steel counters line the walls, their surfaces dull with age. The overhead lights flicker once, then settle into a steady, low hum. The air here is colder than the hallway, and the smell is stronger, not unpleasant, but unmistakably clinical. You step inside. There's a table in the center of the room, the kind designed for work that requires precision and care. The metal is scratched, worn down by years of use. You run your fingers lightly along the edge, and the surface feels colder than the air around it. People who've worked here say this room is where they feel the most watched. Not threatened, just observed, as if someone stands just out of sight, waiting for you to notice them. You stand still, listening. For a moment, you hear it, the faintest sound of movement behind you. A shift of weight, a soft exhale. You turn, nothing. Just the doorway, just the quiet. But the feeling doesn't leave. Farther in, the building opens into the old crematorium chamber. The space feels different from the rest of the building, heavier, denser, as if the air hasn't moved in decades. The walls are lined with tile, some cracked, some stained, all of them bearing the weight of time. The equipment is long gone, removed years ago, but the room still feels like it remembers. There's a stillness here that borders on oppression, a kind of quiet that presses against your ears. You walk slowly across the floor, your footsteps sounding softer here, as if the room is absorbing the sound instead of reflecting it. You pause in the center of the chamber. The temperature drops, not gradually, suddenly. A sharp, biting cold that settles into your bones. You take a breath, and the air feels thick, heavy, almost damp. This is the room people talk about the most. Not because of any documented tragedy, there isn't one, but because of the way it feels. Like the room is holding its breath, like it's waiting, like it remembers more than it's willing to say. There's a small office near the back, fairly large enough for a desk and a filing cabinet. The door is closed, but not latched. When you push it open, it swings inward with a soft sigh. The room is dim, lit only by a single bulb that flickers weakly overhead. The desk is bare now, but you can see the faint outlines where paperwork once sat. Rectangles of slightly cleaner wood surrounded by years of dust. Former employees say they've heard papers rustle in this room, even when it was empty. Others claim they've seen the faint outline of someone sitting at the desk, head bowed, as if reviewing paperwork that no longer exists. You stand in the doorway for a moment listening. The room is silent, but the silence feels occupied. The storage corridor is long, narrow, and windowless. The kind of hallway that makes you walk faster without meaning to. The walls feel closer here, the air heavier. People who worked in the building say this is where they felt the most uneasy. Not because of anything they saw, because of what they felt. A presence behind them, not touching, not brushing past, just following, step for step. You walk slowly down the corridor, listening to the sound of your own footsteps. The echo is strange here, delayed, distorted, as if the sound is bouncing off something that isn't the walls. Halfway down the hall, you stop. The air behind you feels colder. You turn, again, nothing. But the feeling lingers. Every building has one, a space that never warms up, no matter the season. But this one feels different. The temperature drops sharply as you enter, and the cold settles into your bones as if you, in a way that feels intentional. The room is small, lined with tile that reflects the dim light in a way that makes the walls seem to ripple. The air is still, heavy, unmoving. People describe this room as the place where they felt the most watched, not by a person, not by a presence, but by the room itself. You stand in the center of the space, listening. The silence is thick, and for a moment you feel it. A breath on the back of your neck. You turn. Again, nothing. Just the cold. The stories come out of the Georgetown Morgue aren't dramatic. They're not the kind of tales that make headlines or inspire horror movies. They're quieter, stranger, more persistent, and they come from people who had no reason to embellish. Security guards, maintenance workers, delivery drivers, and the occasional employee who stayed late enough to regret it. These hauntings don't form a single narrative. They don't point to one event. They don't resolve into a tidy story. They're fragments, echoes, moments that don't fit neatly into the building's history, but refuse to be ignored. And each one has its own weight. There's a man seen in the hallway. People describe him the same way, even if they've never met each other. Tall, still, standing at the far end of a corridor. Always in peripheral vision, never directly. One former employee, a night shift custodian, said he saw the figure almost every evening around 2 or 3 in the morning. He'd be mopping the hallway, headphones in, music low, when he'd catch the shape of someone standing at the far end of the corridor. He'd look up, nothing. He'd go back to work, and there it was again, faint outline of a man, just beyond the reach of the lights. He said the figure never moved, never approached, never reacted. It just stood there, as if waiting for something he couldn't name. Eventually, he stopped looking up. He said it was easier that way. The crematorium equipment is long gone, removed years ago, but the sound of it remains. Heavy metal doors sliding open, slamming shut, the deep resonant clang of machinery built to withstand heat and time. Former staff say the sound is unmistakable. A specific industrial noise that doesn't resemble anything else in the building. It's not pipes, it's not settling, it's not the HVAC system. One security guard said he heard it during a routine walkthrough. He was alone in the building, the lights dimmed, the air cold. He was halfway down the main corridor when he heard it. A deep metallic groan, followed by a heavy slam. He froze. He knew the equipment wasn't there anymore. He knew the room was empty, but the sound came again and again, like someone was opening and closing a door that no longer existed. He finished his shift, but he never worked nights again. There's also a woman's voice. Now, this is the haunting people talk about the least. Not because it's rare, but because it's rather unsettling in a way that's hard to describe. Soft, strained, calling from somewhere deep inside the building. Sometimes it's a single word. Sometimes it's just a sound, a breath, a syllable, a faint cry that echoes through the hallways. One delivery driver said he heard it while dropping off supplies. He was alone in the building, signing paperwork at the front desk, when he heard a voice behind him, quiet, but close enough that he turned around expecting to see someone standing there. Well, no one was there. He went back to his paperwork. The voice came again, this time from farther down the hall. Said it wasn't a scream, it wasn't a whisper. It was something in between, the sound of someone trying to speak through a wall of exhaustion. He left the delivery on the counter and walked out without finishing the paperwork. Security footage from the building has captured something the staff refer to simply as the shadow. It's not a person, not an animal, it's not a trick of the light. It's a shape, low to the ground, fast, and moving in a way that doesn't match the rhythm of anything else alive. One clip shows it darting across the floor of the main hallway, moving from one wall to the other in a split second. Another shows it slipping under a door that was locked at the time. A third shows it pausing, just for a moment, as if aware of the camera. It never appears on the same camera twice. It never moves the same way twice. And it never stays long enough to be understood. The staff who've seen the footage say the same thing. It moves wrong. This is the most common experience in the building, and the hardest to explain. Not footsteps, not whispers, not shadows. Just the unmistakable sense of someone walking behind you. Not close enough to touch, not close enough to breathe on your neck. Just close enough that you feel the weight of their presence. One former employee said it happened every time he walked down the storage corridor. He'd feel the air shift behind him, the temperature drop, the sense of someone matching his pace. He said he tried to ignore it, tried to rationalize it, tried to convince himself it wasn't just the building settling. But one night he stopped walking, and the presence behind him stopped too. He turned around, and as usual, nothing. He quit the next day. The building itself has some hauntings that aren't tied to a figure or a sound or a shadow. Some hauntings are tied to the building. People say the Georgetown Morgue feels alive, not in a dramatic horror movie way, but in a quiet, unsettling way. The air shifts when it shouldn't. The temperature drops without warning. The silence feels thick, heavy, intentional. It's not a place that wants to scare you. It's a place that doesn't want to be forgotten. Some places are haunted because of what happened there. Some are haunted because of what people believe happened. But the Georgetown Morgue sits in a space that's harder to define. A space shaped not by a single event, but by the slow accumulation of time, memory, and silence. It's a building that held the weight of the city's forgotten stories, the workers whose names never made the papers, the families who grieved quietly, the bodies that passed through without ceremony. It's a place built for necessity, not remembrance, and yet it remembers. Not in the way a person remembers, not in the way a story remembers, but in the way a space remembers. Through atmosphere, through silence, through the subtle shifts in the air that make you pause without knowing why. The hauntings here aren't loud. They're not dramatic. They don't demand your attention. They linger, they observe, and they wait. And maybe that's what makes this place feel so heavy. Not the presence of something, but the absence of something else. The absence of closure, the absence of documentation, the absence of a clear narrative. The Georgetown Morgue is a building full of gaps. In its history, in its records, in its stories. And those gaps create space for something else to settle in. Something quiet, something patient, something that doesn't need to be understood to be felt. Maybe the building is haunted because of what happened here. Maybe it's haunted because of what people believe happened. Or maybe it's haunted because some places simply absorb the weight of the lives that pass through them and hold on to that weight long after the world has moved on. As you stand in the quiet of the morgue, the air still and heavy around you, you realize something. This place isn't trying to scare you. It isn't trying to warn you. It isn't trying to tell you a story. It's simply existing, holding its silence, holding its memories, holding the weight of every life that passed through its doors. The ones recorded, the ones forgotten, and the ones that slipped quietly into the gaps of history. Some buildings feel empty when they're abandoned. The Georgetown Morgue doesn't. It feels aware, not alive, not sentient, just aware in the way an old tree or an old house can be, shaped by everything it has witnessed, everything it has held, everything it has absorbed. And maybe that's the real haunting here. Not a figure in the hallway, not a voice in the dark, not a shadow that moves wrong. Maybe the haunting is the building itself, the way it listens, the way it remembers, the way it refuses to let its silence be mistaken for emptiness. Some places echo with the past. This one carries it. And as you step back out into the light, the air warmer, the street lights steadier, the sounds of the city returning around you, you can't help but feel that the building is still watching. not with malice or longing, just with the quiet patience of a place that has seen far more than it will ever reveal. You've been listening to Haunts of the Pacific Northwest. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review, sharing it with a friend, or following the show on your favorite podcast platform. It helps more people find these stories and it keeps the show going. In our next episode, we're staying right here in Georgetown, but we're leaving the industrial corridor behind and stepping into one of the neighborhood's oldest residential pockets. There, tucked among modest homes and narrow streets, stands a structure that feels like it shouldn't be here at all. A tall, turreted wooded house built by a man with big ambitions and a reputation that never quite settled. A place where the architecture feels slightly off balance, where footsteps have been heard on staircases no one is climbing, where visitors report feeling watched from upper floor windows, even when the house is empty. Next time, we step inside the Georgetown Castle and explore the stories that have lingered within its walls for more than a century. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and don't linger too long in the dark.